THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in again here on THA Talks. It's been a while again, and this time it's because I've been indulging in so much music. I'm getting my nose buried back into some of my music projects, which has been sort of holding me up a bit, which I'm not going to complain about it because it's something that I've needed to do for a while. I've got a big musical history and big musical background. And it's something that I kind of kicking myself when I haven't been doing it for a while. So I've sort of buried myself in that recently, and it's held me up a bit. But it's not something I want to particularly get in the way of the podcast. And it's but that's just my excuse this month. We are actually going to be bringing Shauna back on the show. It's been a while since we've had Shauna on, so it's you're going to hear from Shauna. I've actually met Shauna and I have met each other now in the flesh. Last time she visited from America, she came to the UK, and we had a good evening together. It was fantastic to actually meet each other. So we officially know each other now, and that's great. And she loved the UK. We're going to be hearing from Shauna in a short while. This is a guest that she's interviewed before with some very interesting and worrying information and goings on that's been happening to him. A little bit touching on, I wouldn't say it's what we've already touched on in the past, associated with the Me Too movement. It's very much attached to the power of social media, I think, and I've touched on it before with this show of how, you know, the censorship is such a worrying thing. And I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure that the THA Talks is being censored by Google on some of its Google Images search, and although that seems to be quite linked with the Hope Not Hate situation. So I'm going to investigate more about that. Anyone knows anything about the censorship on Google search and stuff, please let us know, because this is something I'm researching at the moment, because it's it's something that I think that's happening to the show. I've noticed recently, and I'll probably go into this deeper on a THA Thoughts article on the website that I'll put up. And it's linked in a little bit today because it seems to me there's just so much power in social media at the moment that's doing this, and it makes you feel that you've got a less of a voice, and it provides a certain group with such a powerful voice that they really can accuse you of anything, say something about you, and it doesn't matter how much you can scream and say, you know, you're portraying this wrong, or you're lying, you're not telling the truth. They've just got a bigger microphone than you, and it's very frustrating. And that's where we're kind of going with today's show. And we'll go straight in now and welcome Shauna back to the show. How are you doing, Shauna?
My Paul, are we not going synchronistic today? I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Oh, it's very good. Of course, we're speaking to each other now the first time that after we've actually met in the flesh, which I was telling everyone about, which was really nice. We've actually met before when you visited the UK, so we officially know each other now. It's no longer just a cyber thing, is it?
We do, and I think the funniest thing is, as we were saying when we hung out, and I was in Birmingham for about a week, a very interesting adventure, and I very much enjoyed going to the UK and getting a chance to have a very nice dinner with you.
Yeah, that was very good.
But one of the things that you said is when you hear me say something, now you can actually see the strange little behaviors and movements and things that I do, which I thought was kind of funny because now I wonder, are you seeing that?
That's it.
You know
Yeah.
what kind of face I'm making?
You pick up on the characteristics, and it's sort of it's definitely when you meet people in the flesh, it's the real deal, isn't it? So I think next time you come round as well, I'll have to take you round to the pubs and get some real proper ale tasting going on, so you really get a taste of the English amber nectar, so to speak.
Oh, definitely. No, I am looking forward to it. I actually already have plans to come back in the next year as I have family that's going to be getting married, and I need to be there for that. But yeah, a week was nowhere near as long, and just to kind of roll that around to what we're doing today, our guest is actually somebody that I met at the first International Flat Earth Conference. And the reason that I was in Birmingham was I was at the first UK conference. So it was kind of a little project that I'm working on. It's very mum's the word. And it's building into something very interesting, but that was the main reason that I happened to come to the UK, and also to meet yourself. I was very excited to meet my co-host, Miss Stephanie James, as well. But our guest today is actually a gentleman that I met, like I said, in November of last year in North Carolina during the first Flat Earth International Conference, and we sat down, we had an interview, and then, we kept in touch, and he had this really crazy situation happen where, as you were saying, social media just kind of grabbed onto his throat and tore it out as far as his ability to express himself and explain his side of a situation that became completely overwhelming.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I'm kind of interested to hear more about the situation from him. I've done a little bit of research, and from what I gather, it seems to be one of those, like an execution, doesn't it? It's like a ritual. They've used this guy for a ritual. In terms of
that's an interesting perspective.
That's what it looked from it. I mean, I saw. I mean, we obviously want to get him on and speak about this. I saw a video of someone that was accusing him of something, and I watched it about 5 times, and I was shocked that someone was using this as evidence of some kind of sexual abuse or something. So it's and since then it's just sort of flied off for him, and it's like I kind of really felt sorry for the guy. Now I haven't done a lot of research. I've just done a bit, so obviously I don't know if this stuff's going to go into court or whatever like that. So obviously I'm just kind of commenting on what I've seen on online and that perspective of it, and obviously what you've said. And it's ugly, isn't it? And there's obviously another side to this that people don't see. They're so quick to demonize the actions of a sexual predator as demonic that sometimes you forget that if someone is in fact innocent, it's just as bad as rape in itself, and in fact in some cases even worse,
It definitely is. And when I actually became aware of this situation, I was in utter shock because I had met this person. I sat down across the table with him and had an interview. I found absolutely nothing about his mannerisms untoward. I can't really understand how the situation was perceived in the way that it was. But I think that it speaks to a much larger issue, and that is the kind of lynch mob mentality that follows social media. People don't really tend to take a moment and a step back to think about what they are liking or retweeting or sharing on social media. And when it comes to a situation where you're talking about a person's entire life, their name, their legacy, and putting this kind of stigma of impropriety along with their name, it follows them for the rest of their life. Now, again, as you said, we don't want to get too much into the details as we want to bring on and welcome our guest. However, I do want to speak to the fact that there is an element of the feminist quote unquote agenda evolving from the situation to where what people, I hope, get out of this is that a good idea can be corrupted so easily if we don't practice discernment.
Okay, well, let's bring him on the show. And who is it we're actually speaking with today? We haven't actually said who it is yet.
Yeah, we're actually going to be speaking with Shams.
Shams. Well, let's get him on the show.
Hello, Shams. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Fantastic. So let me first thank you for joining us today and being open to sharing your experience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the show and giving me a platform to tell my story.
Oh, for sure. So maybe we can start with letting our listeners know exactly how you and I connected, and then roll that into how it is that we find ourselves where we are today.
Okay. Would you like to start that, or should I?
I can definitely share. So we're at the Flat Earth Conference, and I see this gentleman decked out head to toe in tattoos with these amazing pieces of artwork behind him. And I come up to you and I say, hey, I'm doing interviews for the conference and to share perspectives. So would you be able to join me for one? And that was, I think, on the first day. Now, we didn't actually get together until the last day, but we sat down, we had an amazing conversation and found a lot of things that I think we both resonate with. And I went back to Michigan, you went back to your home, and I think you got bit by the cinematography bug.
I discovered iMovie. I had already discovered, one thing, I've always collected photographers. Photographer friends has been one of my hobbies for as long as I can remember. And I've always collected cinematographer/photographer friends too. So I've always had a history of making art films in commissioning other close comrades and stuff to do these kind of curious art films, which you can see on my YouTube handle. But I've never done them myself until over the last winter months. I really kind of dropped out of everything, and I did a whole series of videos. One of them was called Tattoos for a New Eon, which was the 10 years of all the tattoos that I did in the coast of Maine, which surprisingly ended up being kind of a period piece, a closing piece for that era, because I'm not in Maine anymore. I'm in the mountains now in this post era of this, hashtag assault. But in the process of that, I discovered cinematography and film and iMovie. And when we first met, which was at that conference, and I don't know if you remember this, but you were the last interview on the closing night on Sunday night at like 8 or 9 at night. Like everything was winding down, and I think I had been interviewed 7 times. You were my 8th interview, and I was on a tear. I was just ready to talk to everybody. I couldn't get enough. And I was coming from the post-flat earther perspective, talking about transhumanism and all this other interesting stuff in the 5G technocracy. So my narrative was pretty progressive and pretty controversial and pretty edgy. But with that stated, what you're saying is that I discovered, and when I came back and we had that great interview, I instantly threw it into iMovie. And I think I did a kind of a sophomoric, playful, video where I was just discovering it. And in that process, I recently in this post era, well, I shouldn't say post, but like this post Watsun era, after I got attacked by these false allegations that we'll talk about at the show, I basically had the whole entire month off to do nothing because I'm not tattooing right now. My career's been destroyed. I've been displaced. I'm hiding out in the mountains. I've been in, total trauma, and trying to recover from this assault. And the only thing that I've found, peaceful and soulful is to play with film. And so I've been working on this really extensive documentary called Black Virus Massacre, which is a reference to Black Iris Tattoo, which was based in Brooklyn, New York, which is the studio that falsely accused me of the sexual assault that we'll talk about. But what I found that in a way it was all all of that preliminary iMovie exploration got me ready to do this what I would consider a pretty serious documentary film about this experience. So that's where we're at now. And
well, yeah, let's rewind a little bit there, because you did mention that prior to this experience, you were going by Watson, and that era of your life is now coming to a close. So if we can roll back and address exactly what had happened to put you in a position where you are now in isolation, changing the way to which people address you, changing your life path, really. I mean, something that you did for over 2 decades is now no longer your profession.
Right. Well, I'm almost, I just turned 47, so I've been around for a few decades, and I was born in 1971. The first 23 years of my life, I went by Mike or Michael. And when I became a tattooist, when I was in the 22, 23-year era, this is back in 1993, 94 era, I always wanted to switch my name to Watson, which is my middle name. So during the entire 23, 24-year tattoo legacy, from the early 90s up until 2018, up until this attack on me, I was, I went under the moniker of, Watsun Atkinsun, which is my middle name and my last name. And I've kind of romanticized this era of eventually I'm going to get out of tattooing, and I had no idea it was going to be in this kind of context. So kind of immediately when this trauma happened and I found myself, in this kind of post-tattoo era where I was being forced to hide out, I instantly started, coming up or toying with this idea of a new era for me. So I wanted to reference Shams, which is the mystic guru who inspired all of Rumi's poetry, which if anyone has ever gazed upon Rumi's poetry, they'll know the beautiful reference there. So now it's this kind of Shams, it's this new era of Shams, which is for me, I'm being very positive and like soulful about this. And for some reason, I think that maybe I was, I don't know, maybe destined to be activated to take this position to rise up against this dark force that attacked me. And maybe I was the type of person who had enough of a back history to where I could rise up and celebrate the sacred masculine, or celebrate the concept of natural law, where I do no harm to no sentient creatures, but I take no shit from any threat. And the fact that I was aggressively threatened on all fronts, like physically and socially and intellectually and spiritually and soulfully, I had no other calling but to rise up and defend myself. So that's just a basic tenet of natural law. So in the spirit of that, that's why I'm here talking. I'm just defending my innocence. I'm defending my legacy. I'm defending my name. And one of the things that happened in the process of this event is this, I'm not really witnessing right now, but I just feel that like I'm just been there's a deep kind of calming effect, of being away from all of that, those accolades and all the limelight and all the red carpet of what it is to be a high profile tattoo personality that's been in the industry for 23, 24 years. And to be away from that, I always romanticize like what would it be to not be Watson anymore. And now I know. There's elements of it that's totally at peace, that I'm okay with the assault that happened on me, and I'm going to rise up and redefine myself in the ashes. It's like that old moniker, what you lose in the fire, you find in the ashes. There's something kind of beautiful and romantic and poetic about that. And, here I am in the ashes. There's darkness and ashes and demons and tribulation afoot. And I could see the light shining, from the clouds, and I could see the path on the mountain path clearing as with every passing day. And these healing elements of finding kindred spirits like you guys to talk to is really powerful. But on the note of sometimes I'm guilty of getting kind of poetic about my narrative, so it's just my default mode. But on the note of actually what happened to me was that I simply went in and tattooed somebody at a tattoo shop in Brooklyn called Black Iris there in the Greenpoint era. And I had what I would consider a pretty normal, fun, playful tattoo session where I did a nice drawing. I tattooed her. We had a nice time. The whole thing was very enjoyable. There was good music playing. There was good conversation. We were having fun. We were talking. At the end of it, we ended up having a photo shoot. I documented her tattoos. We ended up taking a bunch of cool photos of this magical symbol they had painted on the floor and this beautiful chandelier they had on the ceiling. And I couldn't help myself but to do some like portraiture style fashion photos. I took some of her. She took some of me. It's in those photos. It's, to me, it's a proof that, that she wasn't assaulted afterwards and I wasn't drunk.
And all was well. It wasn't that there was a feeling of discomfort or anything throughout the entire experience.
Right. And I was so, kind of taken aback. I actually, there was a side of me that so loved the studio. I was so into the vibe of the studio that I wanted to ask if I could become like a permanent guest artist that could come through and travel through there and be part of their little collective. Because I love New York City. I love Greenpoint. I love Brooklyn. I was like, oh, finally, I found like a cool shop. Like I was so excited to be there. And I really, at the time, really liked the guy, John. He was a charming, fun guy. We were super kindred. We got along so much. I didn't mind her to a certain extent. And I thought that the whole thing was like really fun and positive. And I'd actually walk the streets of Greenpoint until like 3 a.m. in the morning, just taking in the culture. It's one of my hobbies is to walk the streets. So I ended up waking up in the morning at 10 a.m. with this super aggressive, conversation when John called me up and said that I was not welcome at the studio, that he was completely, upset with me for sexually assaulting Anka. And I was in shock. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what, this is insane. Sexually, what? I was like horrified. And then he immediately threatened. He's like, everyone's going to know about this. The entire tattoo community is going to know about this. You're going to go down. He literally threatened me like on the spot. And I was in trauma mode. I was in panic mode because I realized I had done enough research to know that the new zeitgeist of this, hashtag Me Too call out culture was super vicious and violent, and they'll go after anybody and say anything they want about anybody. So I was literally just horrified, like, oh no, she's gonna do a hashtag Me Too. They're gonna call out on me, and they're gonna amplify whatever moment it was that she decides that was the moment that I assaulted her, and everyone's gonna believe her. So I desperately tried to apologize. I tried to talk to him. I was like, listen, can we talk? Like, what's going on? Like, not apologize in the sense that I was guilty, but just apologize for like, oh, well, maybe it's because I had a drink or two. Is that what the problem is? Or maybe it's because I was a little too charming and sweet. Maybe I was too talkative. Maybe I was too charming. Maybe I was too gregarious. Maybe I had too much of a Southern, honky tonk swagger about me. Like, and these were younger generation. Like my generation is much more relaxed. We're cooler. There's much more like chill persuasion. The younger generation is very uptight, very, very rigid, and very like they got very strict like social norms and stuff. And I quickly realized, I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't resonate with their social norms, or maybe I wasn't dark.
Well, there's a bit of a polarity there, Shaun, if I can interrupt in that. We have, so this happened about a month ago, and what we have socially going on, the culture that we have going on, is a very high energy, kind of boozy hookup, swipe left, swipe right situation. So there is a polarity there. You've got kids in high school sending each other sexts and pictures and things like that, and there seems to be this kind of, it's not a big deal, but it really, really is. So there's this mass polarity going on. There's this just completely, you've got one end of the spectrum and the other. So you go to bed with this very peaceful mindset of thinking, okay, I have a path, I have a plan, I have this place that I can work with these really cool people. And then you wake up to this outrage and I'm assuming a level of anxiety that rivals jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Well, I've been telling people that, I lost my twin brother 7 years ago to a horrible drinking accident. I've lost my mother when I was a teenager to a horrible series of unfortunate events that were, it's a whole nother dark, sad story. I lost my father to dementia. I've lost so many friends to suicide, to a drug overdose to, getting, taken by the police state, put in prison for, like ridiculous offenses. Like I've lived a long life, and I've seen the dark side of death and tribulation and trials. And like, I know I've really had, I've immense sadness within me about some of these losses I've had. But I realized a few days into this that the experience that this had on me was exponentially worse than anything else I'd ever experienced before. Like losing my twin brother tragically 7 years ago was the heaviest, darkest chapter of my life. This experience was darker than that. This was so heavy. The problem is that immediately when it happened, I tried, usually it takes 5 hours to drive from New York City to Portland, Maine, which is where I'm from. It took me 12 hours because I was, I kept kind of pulling over with huge like anxiety as I witnessed them posting this stuff. And then all of a sudden I started getting these attacks, of like people coming after me. And immediately it went from being a sexual assault to being within a few hours to being a rapist. And I was getting the most violent text messages on my phone that people who had my number, they were giving out my number to text message or DMs on Instagram, to Facebook things, to people attacking me on my emails, to people coming at me on my YouTube handle. Like it was a full frontal assault. By the time I hit, 12 hours later, and I was hoping to be home by like 3 o'clock, I ended up getting home at like midnight. But I was traumatized. I was so in shock, and the family had heard about it. Everyone had heard about it. It had literally gone viral. By the time I got home, the tattoo community had picked up on it, and it exponentially went viral. Not only in the tattoo community, but it went viral in the Portland city community because I'm a high-profile personality, and I had 37,000 followers at the time. Now I have 0. I had to shut down my Facebook account because it was just such a vicious attack on me. But the general sentiment is that there was the most traumatic assault on me. Like all of a sudden I'm getting accused of sexual assault, which is a completely fallacious, false accusation that's demonstrably, proven with my evidence and with looking at her flimsy evidence against me. It's so easy to dismantle her arguments against me. But the idea that I assaulted her was actually the opposite. Like I was actually the one that was aggressively assaulted by this, what I call a hashtag lynch mob, democracy, and this kangaroo court, this debased form of like, of progressive radical left, whatever you want to call it, whatever monikers you have. I was the one that they're actually guilty of libel, slander, and defamation against me. And their accusation caused an immense ocean. Thousands of people came after me and attacked me. I was the one that was actually assaulted and raped, so to speak, to use that word that they so recklessly, endorsed and allowed to like thrive in their circles. I was the one that was actually assaulted. And the trauma that it had on me and my family over a 3 to 4 day period was the darkest, saddest, most tragic, experience I've ever had. The family was literally decimated. We were crushed. I couldn't even get out. I could barely get out of bed. I didn't eat for days. I was horrified. I didn't know what to do. And it wasn't until I had this epiphany, this apotheosis of Shaun's, if you want to call it that. I was at my darkest hour when I was on the brink of suicide and like tragic thoughts about like how, about how diabolical and horrible and insidious this attack was on me. I had no other ideas or resolutions on what to do. I got visited by this beautiful light, this essence, from the source itself or whatever you want to call it. But some light visited me at the witch's hour, so to speak, when I reawoke at like 4 o'clock. It was the first time I actually slept in 3 days. And I woke after like sleeping 4 hours, and this light came to me, and it basically calmed me, like a kundalini calming that was just so beautiful and so deep. And I was just like, for the first time in days, was just at this like this beautiful peace. And it basically, said intuitively that I was going to be okay, and that I needed to rise up and tell my story. I needed to fight back. I needed to like be brave and to rise up against this dark force. And that's when I came up with this crazy, idea that I was going to resurface and present my defense, my testimony, my articles on social media, which was 8 days after my attack, and it was strategically planned on the day that John, I call him Toy Boy John because he seems to be under her control, that Toy Boy John was at this huge tattoo convention. He was parading around like some hashtag hero, and everyone was like, solidarity with John, solidarity with Anka. And at that night of that tattoo convention, which is a Saturday night, I wanted to be able to resurface and present my testimony. Like, hey, this is a People's Court Tribunal. This is a kangaroo court, and I'm demanding habeas corpus. I'm demanding a fair trial. I want to be heard. And in that context, I wanted to aggressively counterattack back in the same way that they came after me, because the assault on me was traumatic, and I wanted to have the same assault. It's like the thing about natural law is that you do no harm to any creature. I am the least violent person ever. I have a total love and compassion for all creatures. But if somebody aggressively comes after me and threatens my life or my family or my friends, then I have the sovereign right to defend myself, to defend my life, and to defend my tribe. And basically, I was attacked with words. I was attacked with slander. So I use slander. I use truth to counteract slander. So I was like, well, I could just simply use language, use words, present my truth, and to counteract it in a way that could be really effective. So her Anka, which I actually call her now, her official nickname is hashtag Anka. But hashtag Anka was, her parents came in from the Ukraine, and that night she was whining and dining her parents who came to visit her from the Ukraine, because she just recently got her green card, and she was living happily in the United States, and she just had her horrible traumatic experience of being assaulted. Now she's a hashtag hero, and everyone's praising her heroism, and she's gained 10 to 15,000 followers since the attack on me a month ago. So her popularity has soared, and I wanted to be able to counteract on that same night. So she was having dinner with her parents, and Toy Boy Jono was parading around like some peacock, some hashtag peacock at the convention. So I had to counterattack that night. What happened in the meantime is that I was so traumatized. I was so deeply the effect it had on me was, I can't even tell you the deep therapy that I'm going to need to recover from this. But I was so in defense mode that over a 3-day period, I kept coming at them. And the second day, I came at them again. I presented the articles, which you guys have read, which basically is Shaun's presenting my story, my testimony, and my evidence and my proof, with the photos of the tattoos underneath their breast, the photos of us hanging out afterwards, in a kind of a third person objective point of view, so I could keep Watson out of the narrative. So I kind of developed this concept of being represented by Shaun's, or being represented by some alter ego of a third person context. So that's why that article has that vibe of establishing like a tribunal, a people's court, habeas corpus, due process,
Yeah, that rolls back into the idea of the fact that we've lost the concept of due process. And just to roll back a little bit to say that during that drive where you went from New York back to Maine, and in that time, there was this massive kind of tidal wave of people jumping on the bandwagon and having more to say about, oh, well, you're so brave, and so on and so forth. But at no point did anybody actually contact you to request your side of the story. At no point did anybody question what was going on. And I think that speaks directly to this larger issue that we have within the social media construct, as well as this kind of bandwagon Me Too, what I say is a neo-feminist movement. It's corrupting a concept that should be empowering women so that people can use it for their own gain.
To that, and to just go into the broader movement, it's like I have total love and compassion for all creatures, and I get the idea that people need to be represented in certain circles, and that there's injustices happening against certain people in certain circles with a lot of different issues. And I generally get the concept of the idea of a call out culture and using social media to call out people that might need to be called out. If somebody is is actually did do something horrible, then if the police aren't going to listen and they can't afford to take it into the judicial process, then maybe the context of a kind of a call out social media thing, in theory, could bring some type of street justice to it. But what's happened is that there are at times maybe some people that legitimately need to be called out. But I think what's happened is that the entire movement has been kind of debased and turned into this reckless form of just calling out anybody in any context with no due process. So, the example, say, with me is that I was literally, called out as a sexual predator, sexual assaultist / rapist with no proof, no due process, no fair trial, no habeas corpus. And immediately within 6 to 12 hours, and especially within 24 to 48 hours, my entire career was destroyed. My family was destroyed. I was destroyed. I was in hiding. I was scared to go into the streets of Portland because some mobs of tattooists were going to come after me. Some local shop called Broken Bros threatened to beat me up if I presented myself, in downtown. The tattoo shop that I work at were forced. The hashtag mob came after them and were like, "You better fire this guy. If he ever shows up at your shop, we're gonna boycott you too." They were literally forced to take a side against me and to say things, I'm sure at this point looking back, that they didn't want to say because they were afraid that they were going to come after them. That's the other crazy thing about it, is there were so many of my friends that stayed neutral, that didn't say a word. They were just horrified. But there were certain friends that were a little uncomfortably close to this radical left-wing, movement, that were forced to say things about me that were negative, because if they didn't, then they would be guilty of maybe defending me. And if they defended me, then they would come after them and destroy them. So there's this huge social pressure to just agree with them,
Right. And I think, Paul, you were saying something in the introduction about who has the louder mic, or how this kind of social construct has created this different concept of justice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's good to have you on the show, Shaun. It's as soon as I heard about this, and I checked out the video, one of the sort of the GIF images, and I was shocked. It's like you sort of. I've had a tattoo done myself, so I know what it's like. And you were there gently, and it looked as though you were just sort of finishing up, and you know when you dab, because there's a lot of moisture, isn't it? You get a bit of blood and sweat and out of it, so you sort of dab it in the moisture, and it looked perfectly innocent. And this is what they were using as in to show it. So it shows how it's like when these groups happen, it's almost cultish, and it's like ritualistic. It's like the ritualistic kill. One person, let's get him, and they just all go, and it's like a ritual. It really is like that. And you were the sacrifice. Probably the fact that I assume you come across as straight, you are white, and you're male, so you're the perfect ritual ingredients as well at the moment. For those kind of feminist movements, and I've had a similar kind of experience that happened last year, where I've had a lot of people on the show, like from the alt-right and those kind of more that are often perceived controversial. I don't think they are all controversial. Sometimes they are, but and I've been there, and I've been to a couple sort of seminars interviewing people there. And there was one guy who worked for Hope Not Hate, and he infiltrated a pagan ritual that I went to perfectly. And it was actually advertised online on the internet. You could have seen it and turned a hi, can I come? Yeah, I'll meet you there. And he filmed us, and he's took a freeze frame of me. And at the moment, if you research Stedman, who was one of the guys that I was, he's a guy that I socialised with and through the pagan circles. And there's a picture of me standing next to him, and they're depicting me as this activist, this far-right activist and stuff. And I've noticed that they can actually control the Google hits with this as well. I was mentioning this earlier. And because I've put some of my images up explaining my end of the story, and it actually appeared in the Google right up there, and then 2 days later it had gone. So it just shows you that this whole the power that these people have, because they're supported, like Twitter is supported by feminists and this left wing. I wouldn't even, we call it left wing, I'd call it more globalist liberal. It's this new way of thinking, because I know some left wingers are very red pilled, but it's this way of thinking, and this is the danger at the moment. It sends a shiver down my back when I mean, I don't really care about this guy and that kind of stuff, because I'll always speak my mind honestly anyway, and he wouldn't dare come on this show and have a debate with me, because I'd tear him to bits with truth and common sense. But it is worrying that these people can just take you and project you out there, and your help. It's an attack. It is an actual attack. And just before I let you come in with some more points, one thing that there's a guy called Stephen Hughes, and I couldn't help but think of this. There's a video on YouTube. I think it's called The Liberal Mentality, by Stephen Hughes, and it's an interview he's got, and it's a masterpiece. 20 minutes of him babbling on. He's brilliant. And one of the jokes he said, I mean, it was more of poetry than a joke, but he said, he's Australian. I remember in the days where if you met a chick with sort of green hair and tattoos, she was cool, it's really cool. He says, now you see him, it's like, get that fucking thing away from me before it shouts rape. And it just hit the nail on the head. I just thought it's like that now. It's like, it's no longer rebellious in that movement. It's totally collectivism, and it's totally in line with what the globalists are trying to do to our society. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's so many things I could say about that, and there's a lot of different trajectories I could take that. I was wanting to maybe keep the conversation a little bit more focused on the actual phenomenon, the culture, without trying to figure out what the puppet strings are that are coming from above. But everything that you mentioned there is legitimate. There's a side of me that wants to keep this conversation kind of light and not get too heavy into some of my theories and your theories and our theories about maybe a deeper level narrative on this. And I think we might save that for another conversation.
Yeah, no,
I'm no stranger to dropping down into those exponentially, fractaling rabbit holes. But on this one, I'd like to maybe, to pull it back into just focus specifically on maybe more of a midstream narrative about what's happening here, without getting too heavy into some of that stuff. Because, man, Paul, I have
covered plenty of that anyway.
I was just giggling with joy hearing you talk, because I could have taken any of those little 10-second clips and ran with them, but. In fear that, to try to keep this conversation kind of concentrated, since we have just an hour to talk, I'd love to be able to pursue a follow-up this in a few months to see how I've recovered from this. And maybe we can go deeper and have like a heroic dose of the red pill show or something. It's called the heroic dose.
Well, I mean, I think to round up, I mean, generally, I think I haven't experienced what you've experienced, and you've expressed how traumatic it is, and I completely understand it would be as well. But I think one of the way that some of these groups is, if you back down, which you haven't backed down, and I think that's a very wise thing. You've got to hit back. Because the moment you back down, then you're prey that they can sort of mow you down, and you're ripped to pieces. So I think it's very good that you are speaking out, because the bottom line is the truth is the most powerful thing. That's the advantage you've got. You've got the truth, and you can just sit back, and all you need to do is speak the truth, and most people will respect that.
And one of the things I've heard, a criticism I've heard a lot from a lot of people, is like, Watson, you just need to keep this midstream. Like, don't get heavy, don't get conspiratorial, don't start talking about the control matrix, don't start talking about the puppet strings, don't start talking about the unseen hands, don't start talking about social engineering and mind control and the Hegelian dialectic and cognitive dissonance and how they're using this as a weaponized weapon to control the radical left. Don't bring up all these heavy topics that most people aren't going to know what the fuck you're talking about. Keep it simple, keep it basic, keep it midstream, and don't get too don't drop too much into the rabbit hole, because no one can follow you down that. Only your closest comrades in truth and the seekers that are affiliated with, the research community understand what you're talking about. So on the spirit of like keeping this kind of like, maybe on the lighter side,
Yeah.
I think that, and though, again, I'm no stranger to taking it into some of the darker elements of what's actually happening here, especially on like on a spiritual level. But again, I want to save that for another conversation.
Yeah.
What I'd really like to, I think one of the things I'd really like to talk about, and it's kind of really important for me to say here in this interview, is this, it's like everybody wants me. I hear this from everyone. Everyone's like, you need to formally apologize to Anka for what you did. She needs an apology. And to a certain extent, that overwhelmingly has been coming from the left, from the radical left. Everyone, like, she just wants an apology. You haven't apologized. It's like, you know what? I've called her. I've left, a few, 3 or 4 messages to her and John. I've sent them a bunch of text messages. I've attempted to apologize. I've attempted to call in. What they call calling in is when you just address someone one-on-one, and she comes to me and says, hey, I don't appreciate your honky-tonk persuasion. I didn't appreciate this or that. And I was like, oh, I apologize. Well, let me make some changes. But instead of calling in, she called out, and she went on social media, and she slandered and said all these false allegations about me. So to a certain extent, if I was to apologize to say her, I'm genuinely sorry for upsetting you. I'm sorry for in whatever way being offensive. I truly am apologetic for upsetting you in whatever way that I did. But one thing I'm not apologizing for is I did not sexually assault you. I didn't even sexually have any innuendos. I didn't sexually rape you. And I wasn't unprofessional the whole time. I was actually very enjoyable and fun and charming. And on the note of that, I also I think it's important for me too, to apologize to my entire legacy of tattooing, which is almost 25 years of tattooing. If there's anybody out there that I ever offended, or if I ever crossed a taboo line, or I came across like a sexually, like some sexual innuendo, or some way it came across like I was being suggestive in some sensual way in a taboo area, I apologize. I genuinely apologize to anybody who may have taken offense to me over the years. But I was just probably in my space. I'm kind of a quirky, weird, eccentric guy at times. I'm talkative. I'm engaging. I am guilty of being flirty in kind of a playful, fun way with both men and women. I'm engaging. I make eye contact. I'm from a generation where we would actually talk and converse, and we would mingle in person, and we would make eye contact, and we would tell jokes. It was not this generation that interacts online on social media or swipes left or right. I'm actually from a generation where we actually had human relations, and we actually know what it's like to to mingle and to talk and to hang out and to get to know somebody, with independent from social media or from Twitter or from any of these other social constructs that are established online. So the general sentiment, though, is I genuinely am seriously apologetic if forever at any one moment I came across in any way that offended you.
Well, I mean, obviously, any sexual abuse is terrible and horrific, and it's good that there are movements that are really keeping an eye on that. But the fundamental thing is, first of all, you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, we're talking about this incident. I don't know what anyone of our guests do. We can only go by what I've seen on the Google and hearing your side of the story. And from what we can see, there's absolutely nothing that holds you guilty for doing anything. I mean, as I say, we can only comment on what we see and this and that and so on. We've had guests on the show before as well that have talked about some of these celebs that get called out and stuff. And I've been in the past, I've been very supportive of that, because I was very much into the David Icke days where he was calling out these people as being pedophiles and this and that. So I was very, you see, it's all coming out now. But then I had to stop and think, whoa, hang on. This can be a witch hunt as well. You can't just jump on it and believe everything, because there's people out there, they'll lie and they'll do this. And it's so important that people remember how damaging, not, it's obviously rapes and sexual assault is horrible and needs to be stopped. But being accused of something like that in our society, two things. One, the reason that the fact that it can destroy a life shows you that it's not the problem that they're talking about. People reject that in our society. It is not we haven't got a rape culture. We haven't got a sexual abuse culture. It is looked down on and discussed. Men's lives are destroyed if they're seen doing that. So that's the first important thing to acknowledge. But also, you have to get it right. You can't just jump on people. You have to be diplomatic and wait, let them speak and let them, you know, because it is really, really bad. You know, I feel sorry for you having that experience. I really do.
Well, on that same note, which all that stuff was fantastic with all those points that you made up. And I remember the David Icke era. I was heavily entrenched in that whole era too. And but the other sentiment on that same note that I think it's in kind of a, I don't know, I think it's kind of soulful for me also to say is that I am in part, I am a feminist. I'm a classical feminist in the sense that I think that men and women should have equal rights on all fronts. I'm not a third wave feminist or even a second wave feminist. I'm just a classical feminist in the spirit of just, equality between all sexes. I'm also a humanitarian, and I would consider myself more of an egalitarian, humanitarian. And I just believe that, there should be equal rights and equal experiences for all sentient beings.
I would agree with that myself. I think that the type of feminism you're talking about, it's actually logical in the evolving society where society is just completely changing, and women should. So if they haven't, it is wrong. But it's, as you say, with third wave, it tends to become more personal and more anti-male. It's more about making society less masculine, so that it's, and that's where it's imposing on men. And this is why so many men and women are opposing feminism, because it's actually altering the masculine. And as I said earlier, I do think, I won't go into your situation on that, but I think generally, I think there's a resentment to masculinity. I've certainly seen it as I've got older. There's a kind of
another topic, Paul. Like this could be arguably be a full frontal, calculated assault on what I would consider the sacred masculine, or as Mark Passio calls, the authentic masculine archetype. And again, that's a whole nother topic that would be great to be able to get into, and something that's very controversial. If you bring that up in these circles, they take offense, and it could be a point that could kind of end conversations. And that's why this conversation is extremely delicate and polarizing in social circles, and most people are horrified to even breach it or talk about it in any critical way. The only way to talk about it is just agree with them. That's why I think it's a new form of social Marxism, or like a neo-fascist form of mind control manipulation that's really kind of arguably being used as a full frontal assault on not only the sacred masculine archetype or essence of the lineage of the masculine energy, but also an assault on the sacred feminine. And, and then you say things like that, and then that opens up a whole nother criticism from topics I don't really want to get into right now. But the other thing I wanted to mention, just to regress back to a point that I wanted to also make, is that I am the most non-violent, non-aggressive, non-confrontational person ever. If I'm left to my own devices, I'm actually very peaceful, charming, sweet, productive, creative, artistic, soulful, intuitive, playful, fun, charming, prodigious, focused. Like I have all these attributes that I just fall into as my default mode of just who I am, the essence of me. But one thing I'm definitely not is I'm not violent at all in any context. And I completely disagree with any violence against women or against men or against anybody in any form. So the fact that they've said that I've sexually assaulted, if you look up the word assault, it's an aggressive word. It's an attack, especially sexual assault. The definition is actually using your sex, like using your sex organ to assault somebody's, body. Like it's a really nasty term. And to say that I sexually assaulted her that night is the most offensive and shocking accusation against my essence. So one of the reasons why I took such emotional, like this call to arms or so, or this need to rise up and defend myself, is that I've never sexually assaulted a woman ever. If you talk to any of my lovers over the years, all of them overwhelmingly will probably say I was the sweetest, most charming lover ever, and that the whole thing was consensual and we had a playful, fun time, and that there was nothing aggressive about it at all. You talk to any of my friends, they'll tell you that I'm just a charming, sweet guy and there's nothing aggressive about me at all. But in the spirit of natural law, if somebody comes after me and threatens me, if the police state comes after me, if the thug comes after me, if a social warrior comes after me with slander, and attacks me, I'm going to come after them with the like. So it's this whole concept of like, if someone comes after you with a gun, you have the right to defend yourself with a gun. If they come after you with a hatchet, you have the right to defend yourself with a hatchet. If somebody comes after you with a fist, you have the right to defend yourself with a fist. It's like for like. Yeah. If someone comes after you with words, with slanderous words, you have the right to come after them with slanderous truth.
Of course.
So that's the whole idea of like, I'm fighting back. Yeah. I'm embracing the sovereign right of natural law, and I'm defending my integrity, my family, my name, my integrity. And that's what they're not teaching to the young kids. So they could have easily taken down some young kid and hashtag mobbed him and hashtag destroyed him. And the kid wouldn't have any, ability to like rise up because he was never taught this sacred element of like, do no harm but take no shit. Yeah. So in the spirit of all that, one of the things that I want to represent in this movement is that if you are threatened, you do have the right to defend yourself.
Absolutely. And you get to speak your mind.
Right. And with that stated, it's so painful for me to think that like people think that I'm, a predator or I'm a sexualist, that I'm a rapist and stuff like that. And sure, I'm guilty of, being a little flirtatious and talkative and engaging. It's just the human condition. We flirt with each other. We talk, we have fun. There's a certain rapport we have. But one thing I'm never, ever guilty of is forcing myself sexually on anybody ever. Yeah. And that's what's in essence, that's why this is so traumatic for me, is that I'm being painted as a rapist.
Well, the thing is,
that, Paul.
Ultimately, what they're also doing is there's the risk of cry wolf as well, because it's like there's so much of this going around now. There will come a stage where people say, "Well, it's got to," and then it'll swing back the other way, and then you'll have cases where there are women who have been sexually abused and raped, and it's going to water it down. So it's not doing anyone any favors. You've got to be diplomatic, and that's not what's happening.
So many friends that, not so many, but I have a few women friends that have actually been raped, and they're horrified. They're so upset that I'm being accused as a rapist when they're looking at the evidence like, what are you talking about? There's no rape. And anytime anyone questioned her on her hub, like, hey, show us the real evidence. Like supposedly she has in the video, like she has evidence in the video footage. It's so vile she can't show anyone. Like fucking show us then, let's just settle this. If he raped you, then show us the fucking video.
Has she threatened to go to? Has she threatened to report it or what?
She has no case. I mean, there's no.
You see, this is the thing. I mean, this is you. I mean, you could probably sue her.
I could go after her and crush her, but there's a side of me that all I want to do is I want to level her on a social media platform. I want to counterattack using interviews, using my documentary. I want to just level her socially, and I'll be happy with that. Because she leveled me socially. She used social media to destroy me. I want to use social media to destroy her. In the sense that we'll both be destroyed. We're both starting from out of the ashes.
I mean, it's the thing is with these social justice warrior movements as well, and the way these groups. The thing is, they're quite weak as well. That's why it's almost like they're the ultimate bullies. Because when there are other issues, because they know what political ideology's got their back, they're kind of, we're ultra PC and we're doing the thing that everyone should be, we're thinking the way everyone should be thinking, and then when you get cases like we've got here in the UK where you're getting these kind of grooming gangs that have come through certain immigration circles, not attacking all immigrants, but you have to address a problem when one occurs, and when you do that and say, look, there's these groups there, it's got a very racial motive to who they're targeting. And somebody in the number, there was one case in Rotherham, it was, I think, 1,700 young English girls, And these people will not address that. They'll ignore it. And then when there's a guy that's doing a tattoo on someone, it will get, sprayed over that. This is how they work, because it's quite brave to stand up and say, oh, because you don't want to be called racist or you don't want to be called that. You've got to have a bit of a backbone to it. They haven't got the backbone for that, but they have to dive on you when there's, when you're sort of in a vulnerable position like that.
That's the funniest thing about this, is that what the fuck were they thinking coming after me? Like, they didn't know what they were dealing with. Like, I've got a long history of unraveling every false paradigm imaginable. There's not one topic, one controversial alternative media quote conspiracy topic I haven't researched deeply and can talk about passionately. Like, I've already passed dozens of Rubicons. I'm already the outcast. I'm the outlaw. I'm the philosophical maverick that's controversial, and everyone knows me as the conspiracy guy, or that, the weird guy or whatever. So it's like, what were they thinking coming after me with false allegations? And they weren't going to think that I was going to rise up and come after them. Yeah. Like, come on. I just don't think they realized who they were coming after. I just think it was, I think that they were completely didn't plan any of this out. They didn't really plan any of their strategy. The whole thing is ill-fated. The whole thing's full of anomalies and holes. And that's why when I rose up and was like, I'm going to counterattack back, I realized, they have really nothing on me at all. And to a certain extent,
bullies don't like it when you hit back. Bullies don't like it.
I did aggressively come after them in kind of a controversial way that a lot of people took offense by. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because I'm from an old school punk rock, era where we used to do performance art and street theater. And, if you fuck with somebody, they're going to fuck with you. And that's the thing. I'm sorry to cuss. I don't know if this is
No, you go for it. That's okay.
I come from a generation where you just don't, there's a street cred. Like, you don't mess with somebody. You don't talk shit about somebody without dealing with the consequences socially. So it's that's what these young kids don't have. They just simply get crushed, and then they fade into the shadows. Like, you don't come after a guy like me who grew up in the streets in tough circles and stuff, for the most part. I just come from an era where I was so scared to ever talk shit about any of my punk rock friends, any of my biker friends, any of my one of the things, the first rule that you ever learned as a tattooist is never ever say anything about anybody unless you're whispering under your breath to your closest comrade that you trust. And if you did, you would deal with an avalanche of retribution. And in a way, that's kind of what's happening to them. They came after me, I'm coming after them. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Slander for a
tooth. You can hear how passionate you are about it. We are getting towards that sort of time. So Shauna, sorry, we've kind of forgot about Shauna for a while there. Shauna, what are you making of this?
No, it's completely fine. I knew that you two would get along famously, so I'm quite all right with that. But I do want to, before we close, make sure that we share some information about the documentary that you're working on.
Yeah, it's called Black Virus Massacre, and it's about Black Iris. It's a play on words, Black Iris Tattoo. They defamed my name. They literally got my name and scratched it out, and they called me a rapist. There was all these, I saved all these files of Watsun Atkinsun, the rapist, Watsun Atkinsun, boycott this guy, ban this guy. And so they defamed my name. So I was like, oh, Black Iris, Black Virus, come on, how easy is that? And I play on words. I'm a poet. I'm always playing with language. So I came up with this Black Virus Massacre, and they had a massacre on me. They attacked me. They literally sent their lynch mob on me. So I'm using this documentary in a way to turn it back around on them and have it come back on them. So it's like they attacked me, and now there's this counterattack that I'm happening on them. The documentary is very exciting. It's fun, and I actually realized I think I'm going to become I'm constantly going to be doing documentaries now. I love it. It's become a huge passion project of mine. But I wanted to say on a closing note, Paul, how much time do we have here?
You're okay for a while. We've got to start wrapping up. But if you've got something to say, go ahead.
The things that I wanted to mention too, kind of on a closing note, is that I've been heavily involved in the radical punk, libertarian, activists, Earth First, circles, for my whole life. I've always been on the edge of culture and the edge of politics. And I've always aligned myself with, say, quote, the radical left to a certain extent, though I have at times, taken a middle path on a lot of things. But And recently, I'm more in the middle path and arguably leaning a little to the right, which is a shock, but for all of us to say that, but it's true, and that's a whole other topic. And especially since my assault, I'm shocked on how the left represents this type of form of debased democracy. So I've really, there's been a line in the sand, and I'm leaning a little towards the middle to the right now with my politics. And thank you, Anka, for that one. But the general sentiment is that I think that what needs to happen here in this era or in this movement is that what I've noticed with the radical side of this movement, and not that the call out culture at times doesn't have legitimate reasons to call people out who actually did rape somebody, who are misogynist or who are or are homophobes or transphobes or whatever thing that they did that they need to be called out for. Those at times I get that there needs to be some type of street justice or some type of social retribution for people like that. But what the movement does not need to represent is to destroy innocent people's lives. Like, I'm literally innocent. I did not sexually assault Anka. I did not rape Anka. I've never sexually assaulted any woman. I've never raped a woman. I've only always had really sweet consensual romance with all my lovers over my entire life, And with that stated, I think it's important to be able to vet information and to maybe be able to use social media in a context now, because the judicial system's corrupt to the core. They're not going to represent the general populace, and none of us can afford the high rates of $20,000 to $100,000 to take somebody to court. Like, who has that kind of capital? Who has that kind of fiat currency? Who has that kind of blood money? None of us do. So we have to fall back. Our default mode needs to be street justice. And they used their form of debased street justice to attack an innocent person like me. So I should be able to use, quote, street justice to counterattack them with this concept of habeas corpus, which, basically in essence is when you're falsely accused or when you're accused of a crime and you're getting ready to be lynched and they've got you in your little jail cell and they give you one moment to stand in front of the mob and plea your innocence. And if it's a compelling, speech, then they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe he is innocent, and they may or may not give you a free pass. They may lynch you. So it's this concept of that why I brought this idea of habeas corpus and due process and a free trial into the social media context is that I resurfaced for, after 8 days, and for 3 days I had a counterattack, so to speak. And I came after them, in my own punk rock kind of fuck you, I'm coming for you. I'm I want truth. I want justice. I want freedom. I want habeas corpus. I want due process. So my version of it was much more dramatic than it probably should have been. And,
well, not only that, but you also requested an apology note and an acknowledgement that they had overstepped their bounds.
Well, that was the funny thing about it, is that the police got involved because I was very careful with my language. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I know language. And I also have studied legalese and legal things. And I knew that, there's a certain line in the sand that you can cross. And I literally presented in the social media, I'm coming for you. I'm coming to get my apology note because I'm innocent and I want my apology note in person. I'm coming to your shop. And I created this false, it was like a performance piece. It was street theater. It was shock and awe street theater, just like they did on me. They attacked me, with slander. So I'm attacking them back with truth. But I created this false illusion that I was coming into the city to get them. But I actually wasn't there at all. I was actually in Western Pennsylvania. And I was just texting them, making this whole false narrative that I was in Greenpoint coming for them. And then I posted a bunch of, I had this motto of I've got an army of mystics in my heart and a hatchet of truth in my fist, meaning that I'm coming from a place of love, but the hatchet of truth represents the truth itself. It wasn't I'm literally having a hatchet and I'm coming for you. It's just a hatchet of truth. It's not a hatchet of violence. And it was this real fine dance this fine line that I played. And every time I was very clear, I'm going to meet you at 12 noon at your shop so I can get my apology note because I'm innocent and you're guilty. And why don't we just end this right now and you apologize and I'll walk from here. Like, it was pretty aggressive, but it was also really like logic. It was reasonable. You know, they came after me. I'm coming after you. You gave me a false allegation. I'm coming to talk to you. Like, what do you expect? Like,
So,
you know,
would you, if you were to try to kind of bring it down to one main point of what you would hope people would be able to take away from this, and that kind of message, if you want to boil it down to a single concept of how this whole situation has affected you and what you see moving forward,
right.
what would that be?
This is it. Like, my relation or my experience to how I handled it was my own. I did it my way. I did it I'm a street artist. I do performance art. I do street art. I'm from a Dadaist school of absurdist art. So how I responded to this attack and how I counterattacked and had this, like, quote, 3-day siege where I was like demanding an apology letter, and I was creating like a tribunal, and then at the end of it, I ended up shutting down my page, and they got so horrified and scared that they closed their shop down for like 3 or 4 days, and they thought that I was coming to actually like hurt them, but all I wanted to do was come get an apology. You know, they actually called the police, and they like supposedly had the police looking for me on the streets of Greenpoint, which I thought was so hilarious and perfect. But at the same time, the general sentiment is that for whatever reasons in my history as an artist, I responded the way I needed to respond. And people need to respect that I was attacked violently by this hashtag mob. And I counterattacked in my own absurdist kind of performance art, street theater kind of way. And to a certain extent, I needed to do that to create the content for the documentary, because I had already planned on doing a documentary the whole time, and I needed content. I need content. I need a story. I need a narrative. I wanted to create a crazy moment in time where everyone's going to remember. Anyone who witnessed that 3 days were like, holy, oh my God, Watson, that was crazy. And then right when it was all done, I shut the entire page down and deleted it. But I saved everything. I saved all their comments. I saved all mine. I've archived the entire thing, and it's all going to be represented in the documentary. But if I was to leave one point here, it's this: if you get attacked, you know, if someone comes after you with a false accusation, you have the sovereign right to rise up and defend yourself in social media in the right context. You could take counsel with your close friends. You could take counsel with a lawyer friend. But I think you need to not immediately, but within a week or two, I would go completely silent. Don't respond at all. Never respond to any of the negative people at all. And then resurface with your testimony, your story, and your evidence. And go ahead and just present that in your defense. And the people who are looking for truth, not these hashtag warriors, not these people that are debased and experience cognitive dissonance and are going to just believe anything that they hear, and they're never going to be able to like do any serious research or any critical thinking. The real people, the real sovereign citizens that are actually believe in freedom and truth and justice, they'll be able to look at your information and then the allegations against you, and they'll be able to decide on their own whether you're guilty or innocent. And if you're innocent, it's probably going to be pretty apparent that you're innocent. And I think my message is this. And again, you know, in my defense, I'm an artist. I'm wild. I'm a little unhinged. So how I responded was much more dramatic and theatrical, and it'll be represented in the documentary. But my message, though, is that people do have the sovereign right to defend themselves in this new era of being attacked by call-out culture. And to the extent that I don't think we're going to get represented by the judicial system, and at least you can socially level the playing field and people can see your defense and they could vet the information. They could be like, no. I went and looked at my friend's testimonial and he or she said all of this stuff, and you're a liar, and you're based in just, you know, wild accusations. And then socially, all of your friends who actually do love and trust and believe in you will be able to read your stuff, be able to look at the ridiculous stuff that they did. So what I'm hoping that my process will do is that people will be able to hear my interviews. They'll be able to hear how genuine and, you know, and honest I am. They'll be able to see my documentary. This is my form of due process. I don't have $100,000 to go to defend myself. And by the time that does happen in a year or two, if I even did win the case, socially, I'm already going to be crushed. So I can actually try to, defend myself socially and provide enough information where people can actually watch the documentary or listen to my interviews. I mean, I'm planning on being pretty heavily interviewed for the next month or two, with this being kind of the debut piece, just because I need to. And honestly, thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's been so soulful and so empowering and so sweet and honest and like so nice to just be able to have some people to allow me to talk about this. But I think my main message for people is to not feel, is to maybe represent yourself. And I actually do like this idea that the authentic side of social justice circles could actually take this idea and maybe provide local chapters that provide a support group to show you how to defend yourself in social media, teach you how to write your testimonial, collect your photos, to help represent you, to where if you are innocent, it's like, okay, contact us. Let's hear your story. We're going to help you write this stuff. We'll represent you socially on your social media hubs, and let's try to level the playing field. And I think that for the people that are genuinely really authentic, that are part of this call-out culture, to maybe they can also try to establish more of a relationship with due process and a fair trial, and to not be so so willing to destroy innocent people's lives that that have been traumatized by this. And to say that I've been traumatized and affected by this has been the most tragic thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. I'm literally hiding out in the mountains. I have no money. I haven't worked for a month. My family's been estranged. We're selling the house. Like the most tragic thing that's ever happened to me. I have such social anxiety. I can't even go, into the town I am, because I'm afraid I'm going to run into some social justice thugs. And, I'm afraid for them to run into me too, because if you come up to me with your silly little camera, that camera is going to be, stamped on the ground in a second. But, they don't know that. They don't, but I'm just afraid I'm afraid I have such social anxiety. I have horrible nightmares. I've been traumatized by this experience. I'm probably going to need some deep therapy about this stuff.
And we do actually want to thank you for your courage to come on and tell us about this experience. Paul, I know that we were running real close to the end there. Did you want to ask anything before we let Shams go?
No, I mean, I think that's where we got to wrap it up. But as I do appreciate you coming on, and when you get this documentary out, it'll be fantastic to have you back on the show, and maybe we can go deeper into the sort of spiritual and the cosmic side of what all this is about, because I think we both agree it exists. So yeah, and we wish you all the best. As I said, this is obviously, this show hasn't been based on any legal court cases or anything like that. It's just purely about what we see on the internet and what you've got to say. And certainly you get our support, and if you want to come back on to use the show to say some more bits and pieces, we'd love to have you on.
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe in a few months, after I recover from this and I redefine myself, that'll be wonderful. But thank you both for everything. It's really a total honor to be in your company, and I'm a huge fan of both of you. So hats off, and much love for both of you.
Well, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be looking forward to the next one. Please keep telling your friends about the show, keep linking the show, more importantly, keep downloading the show. Till the next time. Bye.